This week, you are to review a few different items, all of which have to do with a very recent scientific study on insect populations in the world, which is actually quite important because think about it: if there were no insects in the world, we would. There are so many jobs they do. They make the planet clean. They make the planet landscaped. We would not possibly be able to live in this world without them. Anyway, so that's going to be our subject for this week. But mostly what we're learning about is the reading in rhetorical analysis, and so we'll get to that in a second. So here's your job. You're going to open up, this is a Science Friday podcast. Name is what it sounds like. It's Sci-Fri. It's a podcast that is offered to people to learn about topics in the sciences as they are interested in them. And so what you'll do when you get to the Science Friday podcast, as it says, scroll to the podcast episode, Disappearing Insects Could Trigger Ecological Calamity. So it's a podcast, so it's basically an interview of the scientist who made the discovery. So here we go. So So you may have to actually tap over here in search and type in the words disappearing insects. And then you'll be able to open this podcast here and you can play it. It's 12 minutes, 16 seconds, so you can listen to the podcast. You can read a little bit here. And you can also go down to the further reading section. It says read Brad Lister's full paper. Okay, and that is the full paper that you're to look at this week. Okay, so there's the podcast for you to listen to. And then you want to see, we have here an article in The Guardian, which is quite a good British newspaper. And this article, Plummeting Insect Numbers Threaten Collapse of Nature. Again, this is a newspaper report in The Guardian by Damien Carrington, environmental editor, published February 10th of this year. Insects could vanish within a century at the current rate of decline, says Global Review. Why are insects in decline? What can we do about it? So there are hyperlinks and you can read. But mainly I just want you to read this article, or at least preview it, get a sense of what is being argued in it. And the next thing for you to look at, this is a scientific paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. The authors are Bradford C. Lister, the one who was interviewed for the previous two texts that we look at, titled Climate-Driven Declines in Arthropod Abundance Restructure a Rainforest Food Web. So you can see that the topic is the same, but the wording is very different. This is the way that academics talk. They use long titles to try to be as specific as possible. And you see that this paper was published in October of last year. And what's rather cool about scientific articles is that this goes very much deeper in depth about what the evidence is for the claims that are being made. It's a scientific article, so it has to be very, very heavy in empirical evidence, right? What has been observed. And you can see that it opens with the significance about arthropods, And then there is an abstract, which is kind of the author's own summary of the project. And then it moves on to the article, From Pole to Pole, Climate Warming is Disrupting the Biosphere at an Accelerating Pace. Despite generally lower rates of warming in the tropical habitats, a growing body of theory and data suggests that tropical ectotherms may be particularly vulnerable to climate change. Okay, and what's really cool about this particular publication, if you look at the jump to section over here on the right side in the right panel, these are hyperlinks to different portions of the article. So you could read, for example, the abstracts, the results, and the discussion, just click, 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 and look at those things. And frankly, people who are not scientists usually only read those 3 sections. Anyway, maybe the conclusion as well, so 4 sections. Materials and methods, that's a section that's normally going to be read by other scientists. Other scientists are going to be interested in materials and methods, acknowledgments, footnotes, and references, because these have a lot of meaning for the other scientists, particularly if they're in the same field, because they want to see how the research was done and evaluate that and consider for themselves what the value is of the study, and perhaps even whether or not to see if they can replicate it themselves. So these last 4 sections, scientists read those, but non-scientists tend to stick with the gist of it. What was the result of the study? What is the meaning of it? Which will be put forth in the discussion and possibly in the conclusions. So non-scientists usually just read those sections. All right, and here is your homework for this week. Please read Rhetorical Analysis, A Brief Guide for Writers, pages 50 to 62. Please study these terms: datum, warrant, claim, backing, restriction, and enthymeme. Pages 50 to 62 focus pretty much entirely on those terms and giving examples of those terms, defining those terms, showing what they are and how they work. Prepare to apply these terms to elements in the following. Okay, so please preview the following. By preview, I mean that you do not have to read or listen to everything. You do need to find a few enthymemes, right? And you need to focus on the ones that have all of these elements, right? You want to find enthymemes that have a datum, a warrant, a claim, some backing, and some restriction. Try to find those types of enthymemes. So you're going to be looking for enthymemes in the article Plummeting Insect Numbers, Threat and Collapse of Nature. This is an article written for a general but educated audience and published in an internationally acclaimed British periodical. That would be The Guardian. Also find an enthymeme or 2 in the Science Friday podcast interview with Brad Lister, and I believe there's another scientist who is interviewed alongside him. The podcast is called Disappearing Insects Could Trigger Ecological Calamity. Science Friday is a weekly podcast for a general but educated audience who are interested in subjects in the sciences. Some of them may be scientists themselves, but you don't have to be a scientist to listen to this podcast and take interest in it. And the third one is the scientific article, Climate-Driven Declines in Arthropod Abundance Restructure a Rainforest Food Web. This is a scientific article. It's written for other scientists. Please note that hyperlinks in this article can take you to different parts of the scientific article. Okay, so what are you doing? For each of these 3, locate one enthymeme, and each one you share here must have a different claim. Okay, so you need to, even though all of it is Brad Lister and all of it is having to do with declining insect populations, you're not going to hit that general note. You're going to find something quite a bit more specific and different, right? Something different in each one. Okay, so a different claim for each one, and of course different types of support for it. In your homework, you will describe that enthymeme by applying these terms. What is the datum for the enthymeme? What is the warrant? What is the claim? What is the backing? What is the restriction? Please note that you must not describe the entire text, nor even a large chunk of the text, as an enthymeme. Whole texts, and even long passages, are made up of chains of enthymemes, called epichiremes. Please restrict yourself only to the smallest argument structure, the enthymeme, right? One element of each. And to complete your homework, you're going to turn that description of the enthymeme into a paragraph. So you're going to write 3 paragraphs. For the first paragraph, describe an enthymeme you found in plummeting insects. For the second, an enthymeme you found in disappearing insects. For the third, an enthymeme you found in climate-driven declines. And remember, for each one, they must be different. Begin each paragraph by naming the author or host, the title of the article or the podcast episode, the sponsor, or the title of the periodical or podcast. So that would be such as The Guardian, right? Science Friday. Okay, in each paragraph, describe one enthymeme and be sure to apply all 5 terms, datum, warrant, claim, backing, and restriction in each of your 1-paragraph descriptions. Please note that not everything is written in the article. You have to be able to see the context. You have to make certain assumptions about what the audience knows. You have to make inferences. Not everything is stated. Sometimes things are implied. And you'll learn more about that as you read in your textbook pages 50 to 62. Enjoy.